What is former opioid use disorder, just for those that don't know what it means?
People call that like opioid or opiate addiction, the term disorder, whether I'm talking about like drugs, I'd say substance use disorder,
Okay.
alcohol use disorder, opioid, which is getting just a little bit more specific. There's some, there's stimulant use disorder. I went to pain doctors, they would never give me a script, like ever. Then started like the searching on the illicit supply thing and like getting prescription pills from different people and then ending up finding plugs and all this other stuff.
Okay, welcome to PEJ'S Recovery Corner. This is a recovery podcast. We talk to all different types of people from all walks of life about alcoholism, addiction, mental health. Today, I have a very special guest on. This is McCauley Sexton from Sexton Space. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Okay. We will get more into what McCauley does. He's a consultant for an alternative recovery organization, but he is a person of interest in PEJ'S world. He actually found me, I think, on my TikTok a long time ago, stitched me, and then we had a message, and I said to him, would you be open to coming on my podcast? Because I think every other person from the harm reduction community that I ever asked was absolutely opposed. So you're the first. I think one of the first ones that actually was open enough to do it. Now, welcome to the corner, first and foremost. It's
Good to be
really
here.
good to have you. I mean, I watch your videos all the time. You're fun to watch. I like the way that you speak. You're well spoken and obviously
Thanks.
very well educated in your ideologies and workspace.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you first and foremost. Let's delve into your past a little bit. See who McCauley is. So where were you born, raised, all that stuff, all the good stuff.
Let's do it. So born and raised in Austin, Texas. And for those that are unfamiliar, Austin is people often say it's like an island in Texas when it comes to a little bit more liberal, compared to other parts of Texas.
I always say Austin's like the LA of Texas.
It is. It
Yeah, yeah.
100% is. And when you look at, back in the 60s, how a lot of hippies actually came here, like my grandma, OG hippie came here and it really influenced like the culture of Austin. And of course, we, are seen as like the live music capital. I don't know if that's still accurate, but, I grew up in that. So my dad and my uncle are both musicians who were a huge part of the culture here. So I grew up in the live music scene. So like going to bars and clubs and being like a child in those settings, which I'm really glad I had that experience, honestly, because it was like, I mean, there were parts of it that made me grow up really fast, but at the same time, it was so eclectic and just like authentic that it definitely sculpted who I am. And I was treated like an adult. Like very young, like I was in bars, I was in venues that you're not supposed to be in if you're a child, but then they would let me in because of my dad. So I grew up in that. And then on my mom's side, that was the hippie, just Cali vibe. And so there's a lot of cannabis, from a young age, that was a normal part of our family and our culture. And
Mhm.
then, more alcohol on the other side, probably with the live music stuff. So yeah, I just grew up in a space that was very normal to be around, probably cannabis more than alcohol, actually. So it was like, as a very young kid at grandma's house, just in like a hot boxed room type of stuff. And then my mom's like, hey, no, let's not do that with the kid in the room, so yeah, that was just kind of my like kind of personal family upbringing and the culture around that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I went to Montessori school for the first 3 years of my like schooling career. So
That
for
is
those that
what's Montessori school? Is that like a
Montessori is like super
Catholic?
hippie, like you get to do whatever you want. You like I just would draw pictures and that's where I got really into like art and just like drawing and actually animation for some like back in the day they had like a weird animation program that I did, and so I was really into that. But
Mhm.
basically the reason I even bring that up is because it kind of gives you an idea of just where I come from as far as that, and that lasted a while. But then after years, it was like hey, he needs to like learn how to do math probably, and needs to know how to like read effectively, because I couldn't read effectively by like third grade, and I couldn't do
Really?
basic math. No,
Okay.
because they didn't make me.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, then I ended up going to a public school because yeah, I needed to learn how to read, and I guess in that space they weren't going to force it.
Right.
So yeah, they thought I was like they thought I had a learning disability, which I definitely do, like I to a certain degree, but they thought it was worse than it was, but I
Mhm.
just never was taught how to read or do math, and so I learned really quickly, and then like did really well with reading and writing, and I became like a writer and all this other stuff, which is like carried over to my life now. I do a lot of writing. But yeah, that was just like basic life stuff. But as far as like if I'm going into like substance use disorder and like how that started, like I mean, I was one of those people who was really, really, I didn't want to be like certain people that I saw in my life. Like I was like, I'm not gonna drink, I'm not gonna do drugs, I'm not gonna do any of that stuff because my mom is someone who has recovered from alcohol use disorder. And so that made me really judge alcohol, first of all. I was like, nah, like I used to have so much judgment towards alcohol.
Right.
It was just because of what I witnessed and the trauma that I faced from that. But yeah, so I was one of those kids that like I was in my peer group, I was the one that was staying inside while everyone was going out and smoking, or
Mm.
I was the one that like wasn't drinking when everyone else was.
Right.
And it was just kind of like weird and isolating. And it was because I was just really in my head. I was just always as a little kid. I mean, I suffered from really intense depression. I was suicidal as a child.
Wow.
Yeah, like real like rough stuff. I thought that I deserved to die because of my behavior wasn't perfect and I was a human, nothing
Were there any
big.
siblings or anything like that, or were you an only child?
Later on, yeah, I have a sister who's 8 years younger than me, but it was just me for a while. And yeah, it was just I was very I had an overwhelming presence of some sort of I'm a very spiritual person. It's not something I broadcast or even talk about really, but I almost had this presence that I believed that not like a just spiritual thing, but like a religious type of thing. Like I thought that like a Christian God was watching me at all times, and no one had put that on me or projected that onto me. It was just like culturally influenced, I guess. And that's actually part of why I like wanted to die, is because I thought that God wanted me to die. It was really, really weird. Because like I said, I don't come from a Christian background, and the people in my life, like my great grandma,
Uh-huh.
that was a Christian, she was like super badass and super sweet and not judgmental, you know?
Oh,
So it
wow.
was weird for that to be part of my experience. And yeah, so that was huge for me. And then, it definitely kind of carries over to when I would have challenging experiences. And one of the most significant one was that I got hit by a car on my bike. And
How old were you?
I was 14.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I got hit by a car on my bike. I was really into just like street biking culture, not like BMXing, but like I was really into a lot of different stuff back then. Like I was really heavy into the local like graffiti scene and all these other things. So I was like out on my bike a lot, basically, is the
Right.
point. And yeah, just one day I ended up going down a hill really fast, like a really one of the main streets here in Austin called Lamar.
Mm.
And I went through a green light, but there was someone who decided to make a unprotected turn,
Yeah.
and they I basically T-boned them. So like
Were you
they
wearing
just
a helmet?
no, I was not wearing a helmet. I never wore a helmet. Even I'm also like I would say I'm a skateboarder, but I haven't skated in years. But so I never wore a helmet skating, never on a bike. I would never ride a bike in the street without a helmet now, ever. I won't even ride a bike in the street. But yeah, so basically that's like what changed. That is what changed my life. Like there's that event, and then my life was never the same after that, like at all.
So during that time, as far as all that happening, did you go when you say graffiti scene? I remember going to Austin one time, and there's like this area where graffiti's allowed. It's this huge open area.
Uh, the Hope Wall. See that was. So I grew up within the graffiti culture of like what people would call and stuff like that. So like very anti like what you would call a free wall
Yeah,
to some degree. And I yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. The Hope Wall. That was a cool little thing, but there's something snobby about the kind of subculture that I was in, to where
yeah,
like we had one spot like that was a little bit more in the cut. It wasn't as like touristy or whatever, but but yeah, that was like a huge part of Austin towards like later on in life. I never really even knew about it. It was actually pretty sure it was an actual building when
yeah.
around that time, and then it got kind of broken down to where it was just kind of interior walls and like an open thing with no roof or ceiling. But that was a cool thing, and actually I believe they're recreating it in somewhere, I think on the outskirts of Austin. And one of my OGs, shout out to Sloke. He's a 12-step dude. Sloke, he I think is part of like consulting or developing the new Hope Wall. But yeah, that's dope that you saw that. That
Uh,
was a
yeah, I
that was a
love
cool
graffiti
spot.
too. My boy Gil's the one that did this right here. He's a professional graffiti artist. I used to do a lot of tagging
Nice.
and graffiti too, some murals. I'm all about that culture. So
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I allegedly did a lot of tags and a lot of throw ups and shit, but just
yeah,
allegedly. And yeah, so that was just what I was on back then. We were just kids, like just going out, and it was really honestly fun. I think a lot less dangerous back then.
yeah,
Just when we consider Austin wasn't as big. I mean, and there were events to where, again, allegedly we would run from the cops. Like you're not,
yeah,
that's like a pretty big deal if you actually like run away. And there are scenarios to where, again, allegedly we did that. And so that was just the kind of vibe. It was like,
lifestyle. Yep.
yeah, we're just,
Now,
again,
but that
skaters.
that car accident, did that fuck you up? Like, were
Oh
you?
yeah, yeah. So that's basically, so I fractured my L5,
Uh-huh.
and that created something called spondylolisthesis, which is a mouthful. It's really weird.
Yeah,
Spondylolisthesis, and so that creates something just chronic inflammation, but it has to do with discs, and like your disc is basically like, it's not a slipped disc, but it's like an issue to where it's potentially going to slip,
yeah.
and it was caused by a fracture. And I'm butchering the definite, like the explanation of what that that is, but yeah, so that changed my life very quickly, and it was one of those. It was a near death experience to where I remember flying in the air and being like, "Oh, you're done, bro." Like I remember vividly being in there and thinking, yeah, this is it, dude. And I was like, I was pissed. I was like, I can't believe this is how I'm going out of everything that I like, this is it. So yeah, that is when my life changed, because I mean, immediately it was such a, scary event that they brought my family to the scene, which I've never heard of that
Mhm.
ever happening. I don't know. Because I sustained a spinal injury, they were like really careful in moving me and stuff, but I was on the ground for a long enough time for them to bring my mom, my dad, and my
Wow.
sister.
Mhm.
So very, yeah, intense. And I guess they thought I was gonna die because they were brought there, So
Right.
they were like, "Oh, this is obviously like very, very serious," and it was. But so yeah, they drove me off to, funny enough, a children's hospital,
Mhm.
and I'm a tall dude, so I was in like these tiny beds in this children's hospital. But that was my introduction to pharmaceuticals. Prior to that, I was like very scared of them. Um, I did, the older I got, the more I was like, okay, I'll like smoke a bowl of swag out of a can,
Yeah.
or I'll drink a beer. But I never took it to the levels that my friends did, because every time I did that, I was in like a spiral of like weird mental health shit going on. So it would be like, I would smoke one bowl and be like, "Oh, my life is going to be ruined now because I did this," and I would like go off in these weird tangents and weird areas that were just like kind of self-torturing. So, and I noticed I had friends that were thoroughly enjoying themselves, and I was like, "What's going on with this? Because this is weird that I'm like sitting here in shame about it." So, but I think it's important to note that I was like terrified of like Tylenol. I was terrified of like any pills or anything like that. They scared me. They seemed just scary. They're just very scary. And so,
So
when
were you hospitalized after that? Like,
yeah. So
for how long?
honestly, it was a matter of days, and then I was put on like bed rest
Okay, yeah,
for months.
right.
So yeah, they gave me Dilaudid, and I remember again, it was this like conflicting thing. It was like I don't want to take this, but if I tried to move, I would pass out from pain. So
Wow.
I was like, all right. And then they gave, that's when they started giving me, they gave me like, probably gave me Ativan. That's usually what they give in the hospital.
Yeah,
But then they kind of left, they sent me off with, a basic like 10 milligram Norco script and like a 10 milligram Valium script. So I basically had opioids and benzos, um, or opiates and benzos, just prescribed at that point. And I was in at the time me, my mom, and my sister lived in like a studio apartment, and so I was just kind of in there, just laying there, and that's where again my mental health it declined really deeply because I was like this like I had this mentality, like I said, that I had this overwhelming presence that I needed to just do good at all times, and I was perceiving that as bad. When in reality, my pain was being adequately treated, and
right.
I was demonizing it from the very beginning.
Did you like go
Um,
into a deep depression during that time?
oh yeah. It was like what it felt like was that again there was just these life events that were signs that I shouldn't be here. That is what I basically perceived like all of these things as. It was like I always say it was like I felt like I was in the Truman Show and that everything
Yeah,
was set up to be
yeah.
like
The story's about you. Yeah,
yeah, like this is all about you being bad and you're
right.
not worthy and you're shitty and you don't deserve to be alive. So yeah, that was just the beginning of me immediately. I was never given like I went to pain doctors. They would never give me a script like ever. So that then started like the searching on the illicit supply thing and like getting prescription pills from different people and then like ending up like finding plugs and all this other stuff. So the only time I ever got scripts that were mine was when I would have like a crazy flare up and I would go to the hospital. I go to the ER rather, and they would end up like begrudgingly giving me a script, and
Right.
that didn't always happen though. So it was really just ER doctors that were like they were compassionate and they were like, oh yeah, like this dude's really going through it. So it's a weird mixture being someone with legit chronic pain. I still have it to this day. And also having a former opioid use disorder. It's like, it's kind of like double bingo with that, to where it was like, I didn't even know. I was like, how much of this is valid? How much of this is not?
Will you
I
explain what is former opioid use disorder, just for those that don't know what it means?
Yeah, so like people would call that like opioid or opiate addiction. So like for me, I use the term disorder, whether I'm talking about like drugs, I'd say substance use disorder,
Okay.
alcohol use disorder, opioid, which is getting just a little bit more specific. There's some, there's stimulant use disorder.
Yeah.
There's other things
So
that
as a former opiate addict, like what you used to use
yeah,
before, that's what you mean. And
yeah.
okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's definitely something that I think is important to acknowledge as past tense.
Yes. I used
I
to do it. I don't do that anymore.
yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
it's and we can go into it more throughout this, but like it's the same thing as when I say I'm not in recovery.
Right. Right.
And that's actually in alignment with 12-step literature when you look at the mention of recovered within the literature, which is
Right.
interesting. So there's different camps with that, as
Oh,
like
well,
to where
believe me, I want to talk about that because I have my own outlook on it, and I actually understand exactly what you're talking about.
yeah,
I think like, we'll discuss that later, but
let's do it.
so let's keep going with
Yeah.
uh when you were seeking this stuff illicitly, like through the
Yeah.
plug or online sources and things like that. How
Yeah.
old were you during that time? Was this later in
So
your teens?
this was, late 14 to I actually went to treatment when I was 21. So
Okay. How old are you right
um
now?
I'm 32.
All right. And then when you went to treatment, was that because your family was worried about you because now you have this drug problem?
Yeah.
At what time? At
Yeah.
21?
Yeah. And so, and I'll expand a little bit of just really quickly on like, so I wasn't like privy enough to understand like Silk Road and shit. Just I should, if I figured that out, I would have probably been a little bit better off and not out, on the city bus, just like trying to find stuff all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was like this scavenger hunt that I was kind of constantly on because a lot of the connections that I had were primarily like for benzos and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And then I would like periodically find like a reliable like opiate source. I was really into like drinking lean. That was like another thing that I went into because we're in Texas. It's like a huge part of
Yeah,
Houston culture, and just it spills over all throughout Texas, and it definitely has influenced the United States when it comes to the prevalence of drinking lean within hip hop, and even things
sure.
like diamond grills and all this other stuff. So I grew up in that as
The
well. So that was
culture now.
another.
Question, when you were
Yeah.
doing that, how were you obtaining it's promethazine and codeine, right? Like
Yeah.
just so how were you obtaining that? Like, isn't that supposed to be
So
through a doctor?
yeah, no, I never got a script from a doctor when it came to that. I had this OG that was like probably late
Just have the shit,
60s.
the plug.
Yeah, and he was a very interesting one. He had like a Joey Ramone haircut, and was like just a old school dude that was just very interesting and very legit, and was never like making you wait for stuff, was never bullshitting, was never like it was. I was lucky because that was one of like my first connections, and there was none of that 5 minutes away, I'm
Yeah.
around the corner for 7 hours shit. It was
No,
like
he had it on
he
supply. Like,
he was consistent and professional, and he was like a punk slash old rock and roll metalhead guy. So it
right.
was very just interesting, and such a character. Like
Yeah.
if I were to show you this guy, you'd be like,
Yeah.
this is really funny. But yeah, that was really primarily who I was able to get it from, because for ever since I was in really young, there was always people that were trying to sell it by the line, which is like by the ounce, and they would try to like hit licks on it, and they would like try to tax on it. And so I would never had my money was like already tied up to where I was like, okay, if I have money, I'm gonna get Xanax and Oxy. I'm not gonna like buy lean because it just is not as strong. So
Right.
it was only when I had extra like so-called extra money, and I had other stuff, because I was like, on top of it, I like to go out with a double cup and just go about my day out in public with a cup of it. And it was like it was very performative, honestly. It was like I got this cup and I'm like obviously drinking this everywhere I go. So yeah, there was a lot of that, and again, just kind of culturally influenced. And I was in kind of like a weird subculture again of like graffiti culture and hip hop culture. I grew up breakdancing as well, which is like
Yeah.
a funny thing, because a lot of people like it shows that the influence from the 80s was still carrying over to the
I
early
actually
90s.
respect and I love that. That's dope as fuck.
Yeah, that's really like what I grew up in, like understanding like four elements of hip hop, and like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
all
B-boy culture. Like,
yeah, b-boy culture, literally. That's
yeah.
and it's kind of looked at as kind of corny now by some people, but I don't know. It was just really cool to be in Texas and still be influenced like that. Like we
Yeah.
watched like Style Wars when we were like really young, and then we're going to like b-boy conventions. We had a crew called Unity Tribe and all this. So, but the point is like that stuff kind of fell to the wayside, and then I was just exclusively like a freestyler. So I just went around like on the city bus, going into different places, meeting people for the first time, and then just like smoking blunts with them and freestyling. And it was pretty
Yeah.
much all I did. Like it was, I had my own apartment for a little bit. That didn't last long because I just wouldn't hold a job for very long. I
Yeah.
started working at a very young age. At like 13, I started doing construction with my grandpa, and then that just like I just got sick of like the manual labor type stuff. And then after I got hit by a car, it was like total justification to be like, bro, you're not about to go do construction. Like it messed me up. So that kind of fell to the wayside. But yeah, just to be a little bit more like clear and just keep it moving forward. I was just in that kind of space to where I got enjoyment from being in like ciphers and doing like freestyles and recording videos and like doing stuff like that. And that was actually a value in my life. I was also, being creative and all these other things, which I had to kind of have a full kind of a little bit of a 180 in my views on that. And kind of part of my journey has been to not kind of invalidate that stuff or like hate on that and be like, dude, that was pure and genuine, even if you were messed up. Like that was something that was good that you were doing, even though some of it was very corny, just objectively, when you look at some of the videos I've found of myself. But yeah, so that is what I did almost exclusively, was just get on the bus, go places, freestyle, hang out with other people, and was just in that kind of that culture. And I had an apartment for a very short amount of time. I was
Yeah.
very, very privileged that my dad helped me to get an apartment, and I didn't want to be alone. That was the thing, is I literally felt like I had such arrested development that I didn't want to be away from my family at all. I just didn't. I was like very just like emotional with that. And there was a lot of stuff tied to that. My dad had a stroke that resulted in him like not being able to remember his music, which was like super whack and traumatic to see. And like, my parents separated at the same time. So he had a stroke, and he revealed that he had been unfaithful while right after, like the same night he said that, like, but he
Yeah.
could barely talk. And then it was like, okay, your family unit is done. It's all dissolved now, and your whole domestic life is completely different. So that, and I'm backtracking there, but that's relevant when you look at why I didn't want to be on my own yet. I was like, I want to be around people. I feel vulnerable, and I don't like, and that's genuinely how I felt. Most kids are going to be like, hell yeah, I want my own apartment.
Yeah.
And it was like an immense, like a really significant privilege to have that, but it did not last very long, bro. And towards the end, it was like I didn't lock the door. It was just an open apartment, and I would go in there, and people would come in, and it was gnarly. It was like gross and just really gnarly in there. But so I ended up living with my mom basically after that. So it went from own apartment to back with mom. And yeah, basically it just continued to just get worse based on kind of lack of accessibility. Honestly, was a huge part of it. It was like I can't get this, and it was this constant search, and then I would get it, and then I would kind of binge, because it was like this lacking mindset of like, I didn't have it, now I do. I'm
You
just gonna
mean
go
you mean you
hard.
get substances?
Yeah.
But
So it was like,
why was it harder while living with mom?
it was just the fact that there were a lot of things that I was just too worn out to do. So like I would middleman. Usually that was the main thing.
Yeah.
Like I make a lot of jokes about like Zan middlemans on my Instagram and stuff, because I did definitely do a lot of that, to where I would find people's. I did a lot with like older people, which was weird. Like I would connect with people's parents, and then I would be middlemaning for them, and it was like just weird dynamics to where I'm middlemaning for these older people. And they were like hanging out like a peer or something, and I'm not like judging them, but it was just kind of weird, honestly, when I look back on it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, dude, is that I was so just worn out just from constantly being in pain and having really poor mental health. So like I yeah like I, my ability to acquire substances was really not the best until the end. Towards the end of that use, my mom had like a boyfriend who had money, and he was also using. So I was able to be like, yo, like break me off, and I'll like get you stuff too. So it was still basically middlemaning, but this dude had real money, like a lot of money. And and he was very generous, and was like letting me buy like really flashy clothing items and stuff. And it was like, really funny looking back on it. But it was the first time that it was like I had access to money like that ever. And that is honestly, it definitely did. I think that there are issues with like lack of accessibility can create a lot of different problems. At the same time, ease of access in my life did definitely create some discrepancies. And that's just personal. Like I definitely advocate for more accessibility to like regulated substances and all that. That's a whole other story. But for me, it was just something that I was just excessively using opiates and benzos at
And
that
this is
point.
this is around 20 years of age, 21 years of age.
Yeah, exactly. And then, dude, it was just again, I kept going to pain clinics. They never once gave me a script. I mean, I would go in and go immediately. I'd go, hey, I'm allergic to tramadol, so don't even offer
Yeah.
the. That's a common thing you'll hear from people is, I'm allergic to Tylenol, tramadol, ibuprofen, anything that I don't want. So that was, the kind of generic thing that people say. But anyways, yeah, a lot of it was again just seeking and not finding. And then when I did, it was like, I'm gonna binge this because I have it in my possession. But really what all brought it to a head was the combination of opioids and benzos, which, when you do that, it just, obviously like respiratory depression, respiratory failure. And so the people still in my life were scared, and I didn't really have anyone. It was my mom, my sister, and my now wife, basically. So that was it. There's no one that was really messing with me anymore. I've been mean to my friends, said really mean stuff to them. So like there wasn't really that many people. And most of my time I spent was just laying down,
Huh.
honestly. I was just kind of laying down like vertical.
So
So yeah,
you went to rehab how many times?
I went to rehab one time.
Once. And then
Yes,
how long did you stay in rehab?
for 4 months.
And was it in
So
Texas?
no, it was in Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah, dude. So culture shock to say the least. So yeah, I had an intervention. All right,
Well,
and
somebody intervened on you.
yeah, I had an intervention. So, and I have a lot of. We can talk about intervention if you want. I know you also do interventions.
I
I have a
do.
lot of critique of interventions.
Sure.
Uh, so yeah, my intervention. I was just talking to my wife yesterday, and I said any person could have been facilitating that intervention.
Yeah.
Literally could have been anyone because it was my family that uh, got emotional enough to like get me to go. That was the thing is like, it was, yeah, the person was there in presence, but their moderation skills were not very good. And I'm not trying to be mean about it. It was just
That's
like,
fine.
I learned more about intervention and different
There's some shitty
modalities.
interventionists out there, man.
Yeah, it just wasn't. And I'm not saying she was terrible, but it was just like, you could have literally just been like, hey, here's 1K to a random person. Just come and sit here.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the intervention was at 5 a.m. And because that's around the time I would wait. I woke up real early. So I woke up and this woman was at my door, in my mom's house. Was literally, I think, knocking at my door. And I was just like, immediately, I was like, nah, Like I was having, I
Oh,
knew,
you
what's
know,
that?
you knew it was intervention. Just
Oh, I knew it was. I was having. I used to say I was having like premonitions. It was like no, it's just obvious based in the logic of the next thing that would happen. Like
yeah, yeah,
I had dreams of it happening, and then it happened. So I was having dreams about it like literally days before. Um, and so yeah, basically it. And at the, I'm like missing a whole part. The last year, um, up until my intervention, I was on methadone. So that I used to really kind of hate on methadone because I didn't understand that like methadone is why I got into treatment. Like it was the stepping stone of me not being out, not doing sketchy shit. It yeah, with the amount of benzos is what caused the issue. Like that was
right.
100% the thing is like you can't take 14 milligrams of Klonopin, Xanax, and Ativan, not 14 of all those other ones, but 14 of Klonopin, usually daily, and then Xanax on top of it, Ativan on top of it. I also took Ambien during the day, which is just like a weird thing. So yeah, basically that combo is going to cause like very intense respiratory depression. And so I was having the classic like like waking up in the middle of the night and gasping thing. And so my partner, my mom, they were supervising me for towards the end. It wasn't like that initially. It was I kept getting more Klonopin from my provider, which again, I'm totally okay with Klonopin. I'm okay with people taking those meds. It was just not a safe combo at the rate I was taking them.
Okay.
So that was the beginning of the process. I now look at that as the beginning of my recovery process. Was when I actually took the initiative to go and to get on methadone. I used to look at it like that was part of my, my substance use disorder, and I don't look at it like that anymore.
Okay.
And that's been over the past couple years, and really evaluating and giving myself a little bit of credit for the fact that I took the initiative to do something like that, when I just, all I did was invalidate it for years. I was like, no, that was like terrible. And it made me, I then projected that onto everyone who would potentially take methadone or is taking it. And so that's a huge part of my journey, and is kind of checking myself when it comes to some of that stuff.
Were you,
But I can also
how many milligrams were you on?
160 milligrams. Yeah.
Okay. And
So
would the clinic give you actual 160, or were you actually going outside the box and getting extra methadone?
no, no, I never got extra. I never sold it. I never took more. It was, yeah, I mean, it held me down, and it actually was really effective for chronic pain. It was one of those things to where, for me, again, if I'm really objectively evaluating like what was putting me at such risk, it
Yeah.
was Ambien, benzos, multiple benzos. Like, if I would have just been at a steady dose of methadone, dude, it wouldn't have played out the way it did. But ultimately, that was the catalyst that got me into a higher level of care, basically. And I almost cringe in saying higher level of care, because my experience in treatment was just not the best, to say the least. But
Oh, wait, so you went to this treatment center on 160
yeah,
milligrams of methadone,
yeah,
and
dude,
they fucking took you?
yeah, that was the thing, is that
Because most places won't take you that high. They want you down to 40 milligrams before.
exactly. Yep, yeah, very familiar with that. So the my mom found addiction medicine doctor, um Dr. Herbert Munden, RIP. He was actually dope. I do disagree with a lot of addiction medicine doctors, honestly. um but he was badass. Like, this dude was super sweet, and just really amazing. And so he happened to know, I don't know how they found him, but he happened to know of a place in Mississippi that would take you at literally any dose of methadone. Now, it wasn't because they had some special protocol.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They were just taking any, like, they were just like, oh yeah, we'll take you.
Well, was it
um
a rehab, or was it like a hospital setting, or what?
no, it
Were
was
they
just
equipped to do this?
no, they weren't, dude. Like,
They
they
just
had
took
not,
you.
they took me. They did not know what they were getting into, because it was very clear they could not keep, like, they couldn't keep a poker face with me. They were like looking at me like scared. They were
Yeah,
like,
because a person that's coming off of that much methadone looks like they need a fucking exorcism.
dude, like, it
It's
was rough,
scary.
and people were acting scared of me. That was a definite thing. Anytime like someone in, the detox, they called it the infirmary, which is just like, that's what they call, these medical spaces in prisons usually.
Yeah.
It's like, there's something to be said about that, which I thought was just really not mindful, or just, I had this idea that they were gonna fucking cremate me for some reason. I was like, they're gonna kill me and they're gonna cremate me because of this. I guess I was associating infirmary with like inflame or burn, or I went like real deep into like a psychosis, basically, is what
I
happened.
bet. Yeah, I can only
Yeah,
imagine.
and they were like, what's wrong with this dude? Like, why is he acting like that? Like, I would hear nurse, and I wasn't like hallucinating this. I would hear nurses like, I don't know what's wrong with this guy. Like, we're gonna have to do, like, we're gonna have to send him somewhere else. Like,
Yeah.
and they're literally saying this, and I can hear them. And then they're starting to go, yeah, I think we're gonna have to send him to this da 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 facility. And I had heard one of like my peers in that space talking about this place, and it was literally a psychiatric facility that was like, you get committed to.
Yeah.
And and I was just like, oh my god, dude, like, what do they not get about 14 milligrams of Klonopin, Xanax, Ativan, and
They didn't want to
methadone,
give you that stuff?
dude? So what they did is they did like a weird. They basically like did a few day taper on my methadone. Like, they gave me my own methadone, because they'll usually do a substitution taper.
Yeah.
They did a substitution taper with the benzo, so they switched to phenobarbital, which is usually the main protocol that they
Yes.
do, unless they use, like, sometimes they use Valium.
Yeah.
So
Volume
yeah,
sometimes. Sure. That's
yeah. So they did phenobarbital. I fucking I couldn't tell that they were giving me really anything.
yeah.
So it was one of those things to where I was just like, in a psychosis, and I was having flashbacks to like all of these traumatic events in my life, and they were like repeating in this like cycle, and it was just terrible. It was like no one. I was locked
They
in
didn't
there.
send you out. They kept you there and they were
They
attempting to just
yeah,
get
they
you out.
kept me there. They had me locked down in the infirmary. Of course, they would escort me to go sit outside and smoke cigarettes. And it was one of those things to where they had the no contact window, and I was just like, no, like it's one of the things I advocate against is isolation for someone who's in that space. Like I understand why they do that, but
Uh-huh.
it's from what I've seen for people who are able to go through detox with access to their loved ones
Yeah,
and they're like devoted to going through detox, it aids in the process. It helps in the process, like
sure.
from what I've seen. So yeah, I definitely I feel some type of way about that because it was like the most vulnerable point of my life, and I like couldn't talk to anyone, and I was even put in a separate room. They clearly didn't want anyone around me. Like they put me in
Right.
the back, and there were other people in there, but they put me in a room in the back and they were keeping me in there. And I ended up like sneaking through a little, almost like a drive-through window they had inside, a small window. I like
Yeah,
squeezed through it and grabbed a phone and like called. And then, my family's like, just my mom was like, how is he calling me? Like you guys said he can't call and now he's somehow calling me. Like that obviously is not a good sign if he's able to do that and you're
yeah.
saying like, that he shouldn't be. So yeah, basically I was in the infirmary for 2 weeks and then they brought me to, the community
Hmm.
and I was incapable of doing anything. I literally this was not a treatment center with a cafeteria. Everyone cooked for themselves. I
Yeah,
could not cook. Like there's no way I'm cooking. And there was a dude from Austin who ended up being there, and he made me grilled cheeses, and it was like I couldn't eat it, but I would try and like get sick. And yeah, it was just they ultimately took me back to the detox space, to the infirmary.
how many days
So
did it take you to get off of that shit?
dude, I mean, they gave me Suboxone like really late. It was really weird. They gave it to me for like 3 days. I don't know what the hell I don't think they knew what they were doing. They literally were just like winging it or something
Yeah,
because
trying to trying to figure out ways of going about
yeah,
the.
how do we do it? The one thing that did help me is they gave me a Haldol at one point. For those that don't know, like Haldol is like that's like they will call it like a liquid straight jacket, or it's like similar to I guess Thorazine in a way, to where it's just like it totally kind of subdued me in a way and made me I was just sedated, and that actually brought me out of the psychosis. So it was very weird though to be someone who was like my main thing was pharmaceuticals, and now I'm just being pumped with them. And that was also part of like my deconstruction later on in my journey, was like not demonizing those things, because like they actually did serve a purpose, even though I felt like the implementation was just kind of piss poor. The one thing that stands out, dude, from treatment is I can say that there was a counselor that was like good. She is a good person and was treating me as a person who actually had a life in Austin and was not trying to get me to stay like the whole treatment team was. They wanted me to move to Jackson, Mississippi. And dude, there were a bunch of like racist people there, like outwardly, and it was just bizarre to me. Like I was like, I've never not like, dude, that's not what Austin is like. Like,
Yeah,
sure, there's like,
some
it's
races.
everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's fucking everywhere. And even when you look at like the structure and like how cities are built based on segregation, when you look at like it's usually like east or west or whatever. So like that was I just that for me, bro, made me feel super uncomfortable the whole time. And just people like saying wild shit in
Yeah.
front of me, and I'm like, bro, I'm the wrong one to be saying this to. Like, don't say this to me.
Yeah.
It'd be me and a dude from fucking Brooklyn, and they're saying this shit to us, and we're like, bro, you're not. I know I'm white, but you're not. This is not the right. And then it was this other like little RIP to Pat, this little tiny Filipino kid, and this dude saying this shit to us, and we're like, no, bro, like don't
Stop
even
it. Yeah.
don't do that. So yeah, that just led to a certain level of like feeling out of place and being uncomfortable. I just had a sense of dread the whole time I was there. Basically, it was just
So
like,
when you were there for this 4 months, did they get you to complete abstinence?
I mean, my definition of complete abstinence is not most people's. I think
I
if
know
people
that's
are going to
I
really,
know what your definition is. I've heard you, but I'm saying,
yeah,
are they getting you 100% substance free, like no Suboxone, no
yeah,
maintenance, thing like that?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so
They didn't give me, they gave me Suboxone for a very short amount of time. It was literally a matter of a couple of days, and I remember just being like, it literally did nothing for me. I don't know what it was. It just like didn't do, and it didn't make me feel better. It didn't.
no,
I was just,
I've seen them do that with people that come off of methadone. Like they wait a little while to be able to get them on some subs, uh,
mhm.
because of the precepts and things like that that could
Yeah,
make it
exactly.
better. But then they'll quickly take you off that too, depending on the center. Some centers
Yeah,
will have you on maintenance. But my whole thing is for 4 months that you stayed there, with everything, all things considered of what you were
yeah.
going through and the racism and all that stuff, with the type of personality you have, I'm kind of surprised that McCauley didn't leave after the first month.
Oh, I mean, bro, I just didn't have any like. I had a gold chain that I had hidden. I had like had a couple things that I had on reserve,
Uh,
but it was literally I was just, bro, I was so tired and like didn't have it in me to go and try to figure out how I was going to navigate within Mississippi and figure I mean I was having visions of floating down the Mississippi River. Like I was thinking I could somehow get like a kayak or a raft and I can float there, just down the
but you
Mississippi.
wanted
And
to escape if you could have.
oh yeah, dude, I
Okay,
totally
so let me
did.
ask you this question. Were they sending you to 12-step meetings? Were they 12-step based?
Yes, yeah, that
That
was
was where you were turned on, or where you'd never had any experience with the 12-step world before that,
my
correct?
mom was already in
Oh, she was
AA.
already in. Okay.
Yeah, so that didn't help. It just made me like more like fuck this. Like this is what my mom has redeemed herself with, even though she traumatized me for years. And so that was my take on it. I blamed my mom for so many things. I was like, because she legitimately traumatized me, like legit events, adverse events that I had to work on a lot. But she also is a huge part of like why I didn't relapse after I left, which I can expand on more in a little bit. But yeah, so it was 12-step based. We had the owner, I guess he may have been part owner,
Uh,
dude named like Tom Kepner. He was a sweet guy. And honestly, his approach was that of here, we're gonna read this book, and if you like it, then cool. If you don't, all right. So you know, uh yeah, I just immediately was doing my best to try to relate more than anything. I was like, let me see if I because I was very, very, I was genuinely wanting to like not um feel obligated to like use substances. That was the main thing. Is like for me, the main thing was I felt like it was like I was stuck with that, and it was less about like outside consequences or things like that. Like a lot of people often put emphasis on like outside consequences and events, and for
yeah.
me, I was like, it wasn't about that at all. That was just what I viewed life as. Like I alluded to earlier, I was like, my life is challenges and being hated on by the universe. That's what my life is. And so uh that was just normal. But the thing that was so just like frustrating to me was that I just couldn't. I just felt like I could never really like be in the moment or enjoy stuff. And that was towards the end. Like I definitely had plenty of times that it enhanced my life like significantly. But yeah, so that was the beginning of like a big book study was like probably the first thing.
Yeah.
I went to like one meeting with my mom, and when I was
This is after you returned from Mississippi, you went back home or where?
so I'll go in order. So prior to treatment, I went to one meeting. That was it. I'd
Okay.
never gone. I just went to one. In treatment, we did big book studies, and then we obviously they have their own they just like appropriate the steps and put them into workbooks, and then they have someone basically acting as like a temporary sponsor. Usually like RCAs are doing that and shit like that. In this case, it was actually like a clinician, so that's better, in my opinion. Someone who is maybe a little bit more trauma informed than just someone who is like 1 year into their process. I'm not like invalidating one
No, I
year at
understand.
all, but
Yep.
it's just like we're having people who may not be qualified that are acting as like kind of like authority figures in people's lives, and I fundamentally disagree with that.
Yes.
And so yeah, I had a clinician who was taking me through these. I couldn't write, so I had to have someone write for me.
Hmm.
And it was just I was just too shaky for like for honestly like a year. I
Good.
was shaky, um, which was definitely benzos 100%,
Uh-huh.
and just generalized anxiety disorder and all that other shit. But so yeah, I had someone sit down and write for me. I did a family program.
Okay.
Again, the most unethical shit in the world. The way that they implement that is like a group therapy with people you've never met, and you're now like airing out these letters and shit. It was just like, yeah, that to me was wild. That to me was super wild, especially when I actually started to learn about like ethics and stuff. I was like, whoa, bro, like we're
Yeah.
doing this in a group setting with these parents, like these other parents that I fundamentally disagree with that. That should be done, I think, privately with a clinician, not in a group like that, unless someone's like asking for that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah, all of it was 12-step based. I did a little bit of EMDR. That was the one of the best things that I
I love
received.
NPR. I love
Yeah,
it.
like EMDR is great. I think ART is cool too. If you're like it's a little bit more new, and I didn't even know about it till I was talking to a clinical director of a treatment center here, and I was like, oh damn, like that's cool. So anyone who likes EMDR, I'd say look into ART as well, accelerated resolution therapy.
Okay,
It's
I
it's
just
a very
barely heard about that not that long ago, but yeah.
yeah. So EMDR, dude, that was really the main good stuff that I got. You know, I did all the workbook stuff, and I went to first I went to NA meetings, and I was like, nah, bro,
I,
this is not it for me. And I always joke about that. There's a bunch of dudes with affliction shirts and chain wallets,
I've
and I
heard you
was
say
like,
it. I think that's
yeah.
hilarious.
And box mods. The funniest thing is I made that joke, and this dude, or it was something. The dude asked me like, "Why didn't you go to NA?" And I was on a DM, and I like jokingly said like, "I just didn't vibe with the chain wallets and affliction shirts and box mods." And he literally said, "Bro, that's to the T exactly me." And he was like
You probably worded it
laughing,
right
and
then.
and it was such a good funny engagement because he knew I wasn't saying it as like trying to be mean, and he was it was really a fun encounter because he's like, bro, I got a box mod in my hand and an affliction shirt on right now. So yeah, I went to a candlelight meeting, was one of the first ones I went to in treatment.
Oh,
And bro, like it was such a trip. Like backwoods in the woods in a the tiniest church. Like this church was probably, no joke, maybe 300 square feet. I'm not
uh-huh.
even joking. Like tiny church, candle lit, and then we got dudes with country accents going like, welcome now to the, and I'm like, what the fuck? It was, and no, hey, like I'm from Texas, dude. I got a little, you catch me at the right time with the right people. I have some twang to my voice. Like
Yeah,
I often say that a country accent can either enhance an already good statement
yeah,
or make a shitty statement 10 times worse. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like you hear a really judgmental shitty thing in a country accent, it just adds a little fucking shittiness to it. But so again, it was all based on me being like, I'm this kid from Austin, very liberal upbringing, very hippie, eclectic, and now I'm like with these dudes that I just do not fuck with or relate to. And I was like, and it wasn't that I wasn't trying at all. I was, and it was just I kept getting these weird vibes of like, I don't trust these people, and the candlelight thing is not for me. I don't like this. I want to see who's around me. I don't, it was dark. Like they literally just had like a couple candles up
yeah.
near the podium and shit. So I gravitated more towards AA because there were not as many people like that.
Right.
And
That sounds.
that was it. That was literally it. And it was ironic because I again was just like, bro, like I always hated on alcohol. I always thought that it was more played out. It
Yeah.
was like whack compared to substances, that it was just like yeah, I was just very judgmental and stigmatizing about alcohol. And so it was just pretty ironic I ended up in that space. And
So what
uh
you started, or you lean more towards AA, was that while in treatment?
well, yeah, that was the beginning. And then when I got out, so set up I set up a continuum of care and aftercare. I had a sober living setup. There was one initially, and my mom ended up doing research, and they're like, there is a child living in the house, and there is like all this other shit that they were obviously like a sketchy sober living. So I ended up finding a different
In
company
Mississippi or in Austin?
in Austin. So the my clinician, she was advocating for me to come back to Austin.
Okay.
And like I said earlier, the whole treatment team was like, no, you got to move here and you go to our sober living, which was a apartment complex that they owned, a small apartment complex
Okay.
in Jackson, Mississippi. Uh, dude, like they were really pushing for not only that, but they wanted me to do their year inpatient program. So I'd stay in what they call third phase, which is where we had access to like driving. We could like get in a car and go and stuff and, do day passes and shit. So yeah, I mean, I was in treatment for 4 months, and that's like usually people, they go to like 6 28-day treatment centers in a row, like back to back. That's very common, is that it's like so many stays in treatment.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but that's the case. And so I went that one time, went to sober living immediately, which is like wild to like go home and then just to go into this like random house. I was like, what the,
So
it just,
when you went to the sober living in Austin, was the requirement, was it a 12-step
yeah,
house?
yes, yeah,
So what was that, like
yes.
a meeting a day or something like that, or get a sponsor?
Yeah, yeah, it was a meeting a day, get a sponsor, and then all the stuff tied to it. So they did steel on steels, which I had already experienced in treatment, which again, I have an issue with steel on steels. I think that again, when you consider that not all peers are equipped to give you maybe healthy input,
Can you
it's
explain what steel on steels are?
can I explain? Yeah. So steel on steels are basically from Mark Houston, and the implementation of a steel on steel was with the intention of bringing about kind of accountability and bringing awareness when it comes to discrepancies within what people would call it, someone's program. So it's peer based. Often it's set up in a circle. Usually in treatment centers, it's set up in a circle. In this scenario, I would be in the center of the room, and there would be a circle around me, and it can be paired with different writing exercises usually.
Sure.
There's like a technical steel on steel, like when you look at like the way that Mark Houston formulated it, and then there's like offshoots of it to where different treatment centers will basically like create their own version so that they can like have that as like proprietary, but it's all the same shit. It's a steel on steel.
Is it when your peers are holding you accountable, or your
Yeah,
group?
yeah. So it's supposed to be like an accountability and kind of lack of, or it's supposed to help you to look for specific areas that you are lacking in,
Like,
and it also that it'll be based on attendance to 12-step usually. That's not really the case when you look at like inpatient,
yeah.
but it's very confrontational,
Did
because
Michaelis,
again,
did you and Michaelis ever talk about any of this stuff?
steel on no, we never went into steel on steels. I mean, we'll definitely end up doing a podcast at some point, but we mostly just talked about like spirituality
Yeah.
and in
Because he
my
was in that environment. He was,
yeah,
both of us kind of got sober in a similar environment.
yeah. So, dude,
We didn't just call we never called it steel on steels. I'd never heard that term before. Maybe that's some down south shit. Well,
dude, yeah.
wasn't Mark Houston from the South?
Yeah, yeah. If I'm not mistaken, no, I'm pretty sure he was. So yeah, that's just, there are different names for it, but you could just call it an accountability group. And my problem with it again is like people that are maybe early on in the process, they often project sometimes. And I'm not going to generalize everyone and
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the case at all, but a lot of times it's like people get a little bit overzealous and they're identifying with something and they're really like gung ho and they're like, I want to do this and I'm committed to this, and then it can kind of turn into this kind of justification to give like shitty kind of
Feedback.
a feedback, like just really not legit feedback.
Yeah.
And you can't, you also have to structure it in the, is it possible? Would you consider, about this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
that comes from Steel on Steel. So I mean, I don't know if Mark Houston really invented that, but that is part of it. Like you can look it up. There's a whole template. So it would always be like, would you consider? But it's like, would you consider, bro, that your program isn't strong? And it's like, what the fuck? Like it's just a little bit like, again, a lot of these things I think are cosplaying as like group therapy, but there's no clinician involved. And that's where I'm just kind of like, and I'm not like overly authoritarian and like in this space that I think that only clinicians need to be involved in these things. But when we're dealing with like really vulnerable people that are new to a certain process, it just gets kind of weird when we're having people act as like kind of authority figures in a passive way. So I was exposed to that in
How long were
treatment,
you
and then
there?
in,
How long were you in that way?
I was in sober living for a little bit over 6 months.
And then
um
how there was there expectations like you get a sponsor, you got to be in the
yeah,
step. Did you
yeah, so
you yourself actually go through the 12 steps?
yeah, dude, I
All
immediately
12.
I got a sponsor very quickly. So I went to an NA meeting, interestingly enough, because the house manager, the like house general manager, so this dude was like the house manager of a bunch of different houses.
Yeah.
And there was a period that there was no one in this house, so I was just in this house and there was no one there.
Right.
And really weird, like the first night there was no one in this house, bro. I was just in this big house and there was no one there, and it was just really weird. I was like, I had a lot of feelings coming up because I was like, also maybe about 30 minutes from Austin, and I was just like, dude, I want to like hug my family right now, dude. I don't want to fucking be in this house by myself.
Yeah.
And but then dude didn't he ended up showing up, and he was like, let's go to a meeting. I was like, all right, cool, let's go. And we went to one, and it was it's also like an organization here. I don't know if it still exists. I don't even remember what it's called. But they also let people that are unhoused like sleep there at night, but it's not like a shelter. So it was like people who, if you are like committed to NA, then you can stay there basically.
Okay.
And I think they required abstinence and other shit. But that's where I went initially, first night, and I heard people talking about similarities between alcohol and just like substances, and then like alcohol is a drug and all this shit. And I had heard some of that. Obviously, but that is what opened me up to not separating myself from AA as much, because I was like, okay, like this shit's all the same. And I think there's nuance and there's clear differences when it comes to like implications of using something that's criminalized. Obviously, like that's a whole fucking other thing.
Yes.
But I just broke down some barriers when it came to like thinking that I couldn't relate to people who drank. And so then I was just like, my mom told me about a group in Austin, which became my home group. And it was like the artist, musician type of vibe, and very more informal, and in a pink house, which was in a residential neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
And I went, and I immediately, the first time I heard someone talk, and I did what I was told. I went up to them and was like, hey, will you sponsor me? And I did it like, I was very scared and shaky, and couldn't really articulate myself very well. So I just went up and was like, hey, can you be my sponsor? And
How
he was
old were
like,
you then?
yeah, 22. So I had a birthday in treatment, which was super fun. And so yeah, I immediately jumped into step work. I called my sponsor every single day. I got to 4 really quick, and did like a traditional like third step prayer on our knees holding hands at his apartment. Like there are different ways that people implement the steps, and a lot of times it's primarily based in the book and not as much writing sometimes, and I can expand on that more in the future. But for this one, it was very by the book, traditional format when it came to columns and the 4 step
Yes.
did the 4 step really quickly. I did not procrastinate on it at all because I was very like, again, dude, I just did everything that I was told. Like
Yeah.
everything I was told, I did it, and I did it swiftly and quickly and to the best of my ability.
Mhm.
And I thought I was gonna fail. I was like, I'm gonna fail this. And he was like, bro, there's no failing it. Like, there's no wrong answer. You
Right.
just do this, and there you go. And so I did. And you know, looking back on it now, I I do see that as the beginning of my indoctrination into some things that I disagree with now. But when I look at what worked for me, it was having a human being that cared for me and loved me and was supporting me. You could have given me any written exercises or any prayers or any of those things, and I would have done them. And that is not what made me maintain abstinence. It was that I had love from someone who I felt saw me for who I was
Mhm.
and was supportive and there for me. Uh, During this, I was doing IOP, 12-step IOP,
Yeah.
which was a lot of bullshit, like kindergarten exercises, quite frankly. They'll get people
I
finger
mean, I
painting
don't
and
even know
shit.
what 12-step IOP is. I know what IOP is, but I didn't know there's 12-step IOP.
Yeah, like this one was all, again, a lot of these spaces, I'm sure you've seen this though, bro, to where they just, it's lazy. They just like take 12-step stuff and formulate it into exercises and packets,
Yes.
which is against the traditions to begin with. I'm sorry. Like,
Right.
we can go into, I
No,
disagree with
you're
12-step
absolutely right. You're right
being
about
in
that.
treatment at all. I think it should be purely clinical. And then if
They
someone wants to
shouldn't
do it
be
as their,
charging if they're teaching the steps. Like they should
no,
be charging your insurance and things like that. But there's a lot
no,
of
bro.
centers that will have a 12-step group and such.
Yeah.
And and I could see that happening in Texas for sure.
Yeah, bro. I mean, they brought in H&Is and it was all 12-step, and it was just, I was deeply in it, dude. Like, so in no time, once I got to, actually, before I got to a year, I was like the golden boy. All right. So I'm a young dude in 12-step that's went to treatment one
But you were
time,
an
and that,
AA guy.
yes, like, bro, I became a key holder before I was a year in. I
Yeah,
started my own meeting, which was for artists in recovery, artists
that's
and
dope.
musicians.
That's dope.
I actually, when I switched sponsors, because my first one wanted me to look into like professional aspirations, and I was just like, fuck that, no. And I just literally was like, I don't have time to meet with you anymore.
Yeah.
So I switched to actually like what people call an old timer who owned the house that this meeting was hosted in. So I was in with the cool kids, bro. And that goes to, really kind of leads me to an important thing. That's when I started seeing that there are people who were being left behind a lot, and people who were trying real hard. So like when you look at chapter 5, or you look at some of these statements to where we're labeling people as like just incapable of being honest. I saw people who were being so honest, and it was not what they needed. They needed something else. They needed other things. And so that is when I was like, oh, like, hold up, because I saw people dying a lot, and I saw people who maybe smoked cannabis one time, and then now they're fucking spiraling, based on things that they've internalized for sure, and based on their own personal choices, but also based on a lot of authority figures. So it was all, I'm like excelling, and my peers are fucking not, is the main thing. Like, that's why I'm at where I'm at today. And that's why I started to shift and change, is because I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm meeting people with this one option, and it's not working for the majority of people that I'm talking to. And I, it started to just feel wrong to me. I was like, this isn't hitting for, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I do think that like sponsorship is not for everyone as far as sponsoring people. I
Yeah.
think that it's obviously not a part of the original formulation. I think that there was just all this, I just started to become a little bit aware of some discrepancies, and that at the same time, bro, I went hard. Like, I got certified to go into prisons. So I went to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice training with like prison ministry people and shit. Like, it was really just prison ministry and AA. They didn't even have anyone in there that was going in for NA. It was just AA. So I got certified, trained. It's not a certification. I think they gave you like a weird little fucking like diploma type thing. Didn't really mean anything. But I was allowed to go in an unlimited amount of times. They only let you go in, I think, about 4 times without doing the training. So I did that prior, went in all those times. And then I did the training. And then at the same time, I got appointed as the H&I representative of my steering committee.
Yeah.
And so then I had access to funds to get big books. So then I got the mini ones, I got the mini big books because they wouldn't let me bring in big ones.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving out the first 164 in prison and doing speaker engagements with like 200-300 people. And so that was like,
You were highly involved at the time.
yeah, like, so I didn't just do prison. I also did rehabs, and would go in as an H&I. And I would just honestly, dude, I would speak from the heart, but it was infused with a lot of the parroted stuff people say. So it was like you could tell I was in it, but I can give myself some credit that like, and I'm sure you're probably the same way as is probably I know that like you probably are, and McCauley, to where it's like you can speak authentically, like you can do that.
I would rather speak authentically rather than be somebody that spits a lot of jargon or a
Yeah,
lot of parroted stuff. I actually talk of when I give an AA talk, I
yeah,
talk about the fact that there's a lot of people in AA that will parrot what other people are saying because it sounds cute or it sounds profound. But the problem is that just because that sounds good doesn't necessarily really, it's not helpful. For example, I often hear, I've heard some old timers say things like, "We're sick. We're always going to remain sick,"
yeah,
and I don't really subscribe to that type of AA.
yeah,
The rigidity, I've been exposed to it in some arenas, but I also tried to understand it for what it is because I think that a lot of people that are in AA that speak in a certain way to where they're dogmatic or where they want to be that sponsor that wants you to call them every day and check in at a certain time and this and that. Like,
yeah,
I'm not down for that. I'm not. I'm just not. Like, I don't feel that a person really needs to have a sponsor that they always check in with or run things by. As a matter of fact, I'll be the first one to say that your sponsor, the point of the sponsor, if you go read the pamphlet of what their responsibilities is to take you through the 12 steps. They're not your
yeah,
fucking financial advisor. They're not your marriage and
yeah,
family therapist, and they're not a person that you need to run everything by, right? Like at the end of the day, depending on your belief system, if you want to believe in a higher power, which I was anti-God when I got to AA, right? I believe the sponsors goal hopefully is to put you in the hands of something greater than yourself so that you don't have to turn to your sponsor all the time, but you can turn to that or even turn to
yeah. I hear you.
yourself for better decision making. So that's why I get you. That's why I'm wondering, like, from sounding like a person that was a poster boy from what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
How long did that last? Like, when did you actually stop going to 12-step world
Yeah.
or AA or anything like that? Was it shortly after did you fall off or was it years later?
So, I mean, I did it for almost 6 years.
Oh, so you were in it for a while.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Wow.
I was in it for a good amount. I was in it when I wasn't like required to be in it based on sober living or,
Yeah, yeah. You
other
were
stuff. So it was
you were
like,
involved.
yeah, I continued to do it because I just was like, if this is it, then I'm gonna do what I'm supposed to do. And ultimately, again, what happened is, and I want to say this really quick that yeah, I agree. Like, I'm totally against like sponsored dependence or even meeting dependence for
Yeah.
people who are in AA. I definitely have, I guess, a little bit of a pushback on like, kind of funneling people into spirituality because I just see it as such a kind of a blanket approach for many people who maybe have nuanced experiences.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's all very dependent on the person who is there as like an authority figure, or that's what I call it. But even if they're not like asserting that,
Yeah.
I do think that there's a certain degree that your experience with a sponsor is very dependent on their interpretation of the book. And it leaves a lot of room for some of the stuff that you mentioned where you have these like really dogmatic like rigid people
Yeah.
because they will just like, I'm sorry, but like with Christianity they'll take, you know, the Bible and then appropriate it in a way to fit their narrative and their what they want to impose upon people.
Yeah.
And it just, that is something that I guess noticed. Even I do believe that does sometimes happen with people who are amazing and that have great intentions.
Yeah.
It's, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not
Do you
projecting that
believe in
onto you
God?
at
Out of
all.
curiosity, do you believe in God, or did you ever?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I always have. So that was the thing, is like, that is why I feel a responsibility to make sure to only advocate for spirituality if someone's asking for it.
I
That's
like
just,
that. I
yeah,
respect that.
you
So
know what
here's
I'm
the thing,
saying?
like, even outside of AA, because I remember when I first got sober, I'm Persian, and my mom was really on the fence with being Muslim as we were growing up in Iran and things like
Yeah,
that. Well, as she was, I wasn't. I grew up here, but she got to a point in her life where she had to go and try to figure out if she really wanted to follow that faith. She
yeah,
believed in God. She just wasn't sure if she believed in Islam in the way that it was taught to her. And then later on in life, she started studying Rumi. Like, do you know about Rumi? Like,
yeah,
okay, so
yes,
Rumi was a mystic, right? And so she would often, when I was newly sober, she said, "I've started going to a new Rumi class, and this is what I'm learning. And just so you know, those 12 steps are nothing original. Like, those were actually built on some Christian concepts, most definitely. I mean, if you really study it, I feel like you've done some
the
his
Oxford group.
the Oxford group, right? That's definitely where it stems from. But like
Yeah,
some of the fundamental ideas of the steps come from ancient, historic, like way back in the day. Certain things that most humans do when they want to really better themselves. Shedding the layers of ego. True. So every human being has the ability to truly tap into their Every human being is a mystic. The only thing is that a lot of people get swayed away, perhaps by their ego, or we can call it the disease of addiction or the devil, however you want to label it. But like at the end of the day, we are all deep spirits. I mean, every human, I have had great conversations with people that are atheists, people that are agnostic, that do not believe in God at all. And sometimes they even do a lot of service work. People in AA, I've met people in AA that are 25, 30 years sober that are hardline atheists, straight up do not believe in God. It's a very interesting conversation because I'm like, so what is your higher power? And they'll come up with all different types of things. So I get it. Like, you don't want to attempt to shove spirituality down somebody's throat, because if you do, how spiritual are you really? Like, right?
yeah. I mean, it goes even further for me to where it's like, a lot of my advocacy has been in, again, not only looking at kind of checking my lived experience as someone who is inherently spiritual and who, like I had kind of shared at the beginning, like i I believed in a like Christian God as a child. For some reason it
You weren't
wasn't,
even
again,
raised as a Christian.
wasn't raised as that. It was just,
Yeah,
I
that's
felt
fucking
some,
weird. That's
yeah,
really,
it's really
you know
bizarre,
what?
bro.
But you know what? It might have been, as you said, culturally, your surroundings. Because I, being a little Persian kid growing up in Salt Lake City, Utah, from 5 to 15, it
Yeah,
was Mormonism was all around me. So I couldn't help it, like, hear, Jesus this, and Jesus died for your sins. And then that always confused the fuck out of me because I was like,
yeah,
does that mean we can all sin or what? Like, it's all good. He died for us, like. But also just the punishing God that we often hear about, even talked about in AA. Like, for me, one of the things I really liked about AA was they said you can have your own concept of God. Like, that was cool. But like, even that within itself, like the way that Ebby met Bill, the way it was written and put out in the big book actually didn't really go down like that. Like, a lot of AAs don't even know that. If you really get into the history of AA, that was written that way, the story was put together that way to make it sound more attractive. So really, it wasn't like that, right?
yeah,
Like, from what I understand, Ebby really actually didn't say you can find your own concept of God. Perhaps
yeah,
Bill's
I've heard that.
ego wrote it that way, right? And that's neither here or there. But I will say this, like, from studying your stuff and watching the way that you talk, you're an interesting character because you've got a way about you, and I noticed that there are people that challenge you, and some of those people are obviously in the 12-step world. I mean, I think some people would even think McCauley Sexton probably needs to go do another 4-step because he sounds very resentful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I do my listen. I'm gonna tell you this right now, straight up. Like I personally, because I got sober in a very abstinent based type of environment.
Yeah.
I watched the way that people are on methadone. I always hate, I still can't stand methadone. I don't like it. I understand its purpose. I don't like it. I don't think it's necessary. I do believe that people should not be dependent on it for the rest of their lives, but that's on them. And I make videos about it. And sometimes I get very criticized for saying that. Also, when it comes to Suboxone, like I was highly opposed because before I even got sober, I had a friend that was already on Suboxone maintenance for a good 10 years, right? This is like, and I'm sober 17 years. So when I saw him, the way that he felt, the way that was so dependent upon it, I thought, not for me, right? But over the years, as I've watched harm reduction become more and more like a movement within itself, I would speak a certain way, and then I got criticized because I didn't keep an open mind to different pathways of recovery, right? Then
Yeah.
I wanted to become a recovery coach, and we would learn in these recovery coaching classes. Hey, check this out. Like, if you have a client that says they're in recovery, but they're on Suboxone maintenance, they're on MAT, or even if they say they smoke weed, but they say they're in recovery, you must respect that they're in recovery. So that opened my mind to, okay, now there were some people, example, this guy in Missouri that's like like he goes to Washington and he advocate for harm reduction. He would
Yeah.
stitch my shit on TikTok and just tell me misinformation and you're talking this and that, this and that. I try to like ask him to come on the podcast. I try to like keep an open mind, but he just denied me. He's like, I would never come on your podcast. I'm like, all right. And a whole shitstorm of other stuff came out of that later on. But one day we actually did talk it out, and we made peace between each other. When you found me, you stitched me, and I remember like I I don't hardly even check my mentions like
Yeah. Me
on
either.
TikTok, but I happened to see your video. I was like, whoa, how do you really feel about me? So, but I could see like, okay, here's another guy that basically is going to label me as a 12-step guy because perhaps the way I conduct myself, portray myself, the way I talk. I try my best, like when I'm coming at it educationally from what I've learned in drug and alcohol studies and things like that,
Yeah.
not to like try to shove the 12 steps down anyone's throat because to each their own, right? Like I don't want to be that guy. But then when I talked to you in Messenger, you actually apologized to me. Like you said, like, I'm sorry I did that or talked to you like that. And then later on when we got on the phone and we talked, I really enjoyed talking to you. Like I really did.
Man.
In watching your videos now, I see that um, you've taken your life to a different level. Now you've created something. And are you in Arizona now, if I'm not mistaken?
No, no.
No, in
I
Austin?
do I'll do non-medical caretaking in Vegas. So maybe
Oh,
that's what you
but
may
you're in
have.
Austin, right?
Yeah, I'm in Austin.
You're
Yeah.
still in Austin.
Yeah.
You created this, you created an organization which is called Alternative Recovery.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, that was something that I initially did on my own around quarantine on Clubhouse. You know, and yeah, and dude, just I have to go into some things that you said because it's just I think it's important for me to
Sure.
kind of
Please do.
address some of the things you said, and I'll happily go into the alternative recovery stuff and like where I'm at now with even my harm reduction advocacy. So the first thing I'll say is this is on kind of in alignment with what you were saying, or to address something that you brought up. So the idea that Suboxone methadone is a recovery protocol and not a harm reduction protocol. So that's something that I do subscribe to, but just based on the definition of recovery that you find within more, I guess, like the medical space than like the more 12-step space, to where it's just like to recover, or just the definition of the term as far as like recovering something you've lost.
Yeah.
I view that as more of a recovery protocol than a harm reduction protocol. I think if it's implemented with the intention to reduce harm, and if it does reduce harm, then yeah, that's harm reduction.
Yeah.
But it's very dependent on the individual and their relationship with it. So I would say there are things that will objectively be in a level of a reduced level of harm, but again, it's all very subjective. So if someone is consuming, let's say, something a partial agonist, let's say, just randomly. This is just a random kind of thought
Yeah.
exercise, and then they go to a full agonist like methadone, and they use it in a way that is, I don't know, excessive or whatever. Then potentially they could actually experience harm, more harm than what they were doing.
When you say excessive, do you mean if somebody starts at a low dose of methadone, say for example 30 to 40 milligrams, but they become excessive in the sense that they're upping their dose? Is that what you mean?
No, no, no. I mean, so this is just purely like a scenario that I don't know would ever play out. Like, I'm trying to display a scenario that I would see it as subjectively for the individual potentially harmful. It'd have to be that they're consuming something that was causing less harm and now they switch to something that's causing more. That's all subjective. But then when you look at like evidence and you look at like efficacy for like people with opioid use disorder, that's where then I go, okay, if someone is now recovering any aspect of their life, then that to me would be what I call a medication for recovery, not medication assisted treatment, or it would be a medication for recovery. I think the words here are kind of important. But again, like a lot of this stuff, I think people look at substances or different medications, rather is more accurate. They look at different medications and they label this as like a harm reduction protocol, when again, yes, it can reduce harm in a scenario, but I see it more as blanket, like under a blanket term, it would be more in the realm of recovery to me. That's just like what I've seen when it comes to maybe not being in sketchy situations when it comes to acquiring substances, or even ease of access, even for people who are not going to groups or doing whatever. Like I've seen people who are able to do that, and that's all anecdotal. But I think the clear thing I want to go into now is that there's the philosophy of harm reduction, there's a practice of harm reduction, and then there's the tools of risk reduction. And I think that a lot of things that are, you know, more in the realm of risk reduction are then sometimes lumped in and seen as just like a harm reduction protocol. It's within, this all sounds like word salad here, but it's like if
No,
people
actually,
want to
you're making
learn
a lot of
more
sense.
about
You're
this.
actually breaking it down for me better than I've ever heard it before. You're
Okay,
making a
it
lot
just it sounds incoherent to me when I'm saying it. So for people who are like really want to understand, the problem people have with harm reduction is that they are not educated on what it is. That's what it is. They see risk reduction tools like needle exchanges, things of that nature, you know, different things to help aid in the and not spreading bloodborne illnesses, or
shooting
giving
galleries,
people,
things like that.
yeah, just shit like that. And they immediately go like, oh, like this is harm reduction, and this is like, yes, it's under the umbrella of harm reduction, but this is risk reduction. And so when you look at it for what it is, as like a risk reduction protocol, it starts to make a lot more sense, because the goal is not to get them into recovery. The goal is to make sure that they reduce harm and that they aren't
Don't
spreading
die.
bloodborne illnesses, they don't
Yeah.
die. So it just clears it up, I think, because it just makes it a little bit more clear of like, oh, okay, you know, the philosophy of harm reduction is what I am really into. And I did boots on the ground, you know, naloxone distribution and that within Texas. And I was able to facilitate getting test strips all throughout the state of Texas and head shops and shit. So I've done shit like that. My cause is that I want people who use drugs to have personal autonomy, and to have a say in what their life looks like, and have a say in what their treatment looks like, and have a say in what their process looks like. So most people can get on board with that, like that. And it's, I think you should, for people, it can be helpful to accept the different aspects of it. But look, like there are some people who are never going to do that, and it's like I would rather them at least to accept the philosophy, and to be like,
Yeah.
can you say that you would like people to have a say in what their life looks like, and, you know, maybe have a say in what treatment looks like for them, and, you know, get to make decisions and be empowered. And most people are going to say, yeah, I would actually like that, you know. So that's the thing. Like the whole, I had an experience with methadone that caused me to demonize methadone. because I was, again, like thinking, oh, it's because just the methadone is what screwed me up. And then I really looked at it and I was like, well, the benzos were what were really contributing to
Yeah.
the health concern. But then guess what? Then I started just demonizing the benzos. So then I was just like, no, dude, no one should ever take benzos. No one should have access to benzos. They need to be off the market. And I still hold my own views when it comes to certain meds and because of my own subjective experience. But the point being, and this is what I offer to you, and not in like a weird condescending way, but is that what I've found? I'm sure you've seen this. Doesn't matter what you say. A lot of times, what you say to someone often is not going to make a difference, even if you
Right.
are going in a certain direction or not. Like, and so what I've found is that there's a certain freedom in just being like, "Hey, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want? What do you want to do? Oh, you don't want to do that? Okay, cool. I don't care. Don't do it." And it gives someone this level of autonomy that they figure shit out for themselves. And the thing is that when people want to, in my opinion, when people discourage methadone, Suboxone, shit like that, even if it's like passively, they want to save them from bad experiences. That's the intention is very good. I think it's like, I don't want you to feel stuck in, all that type of rhetoric, trapped, stuck. I don't want you to feel that. I would like you to be free. But what is that based on? That's based on the idea of freedom is achieved through abstinence, and that's how you can be truly spiritual. So that's the thing, is that I think that's where spirituality conflicts with like more, if you want to call it, evidence-based stuff, because then we're having people that are kind of putting that over things that are maybe more up to date based on like neurobiology, which is flawed in and of itself. Like, I can sit here and say certain medications aren't going to work for everyone.
Yeah.
Certain clinical things aren't going to work. Even things like EMDR, like some people feel traumatized after that, maybe because it wasn't facilitated in the right way. So a
Sure.
lot of it, bro, is just me realizing like, hold up, dude. Like, I just have to really listen to people who use drugs and go, what do you want to do, bro? And then it just, I got rid, and I'm not trying to project this onto you or anyone else that does this, but for me, it was from a place of wanting to save people from bad experiences. That was why I would say the things I said about methadone, or Suboxone. I smoked Suboxone. Like, so I was like, I was like, bro, no, like I have to be very clear. I was also an anti big pharma guy, because after I got off all the rehab meds, I was like, bro, they just tried to get me onto these other things. And I wasn't even on, medications for recovery within like the opioid use disorder treatment space, bro. I was on all the traditional psych, like, Seroquel, gabapentin,
Yeah.
clonidine, Wellbutrin, Depakote. I was on all those meds.
Yeah.
So a huge part of my journey, again, has just been kind of like, I've said it before, but just checking my experiences, and this is like foreign to many people, and that sounded condescending, but it's very foreign to people to be like, I'm not going to offer my lived experience unless someone solicits it or explicitly asks for it. And all of my advocacy is going to be in the realm of, again, what is available, what is out there, what do we have that now that's new or that is, more progressive. And that has been how that's how I go about it now. Now, where I got fucked up at first is when, again, I started with so many people passing away. I started to just get really mad, because I was like, everyone's being funneled into a one size fits all approach. This is making me mad. And so you're seeing now a very refined version of of where I was at with it, to where I literally was like, I need to do whatever I can to let people know that there's nothing wrong with them if a traditional approach isn't working. And it was like, again, I could then fall into this savior type complex thing, and so that was something that I still have to work on to this day, but just again, I totally validate what you're saying as far as seeing people who are expressing their experience and being like, I would I would like other people not to have that experience.
Yeah.
I totally get that. It's just for me it was misguided, and I'm not saying that that's the case for you, but for me it was just not an acknowledgement of like how humans are. And you've been in the game long enough, I'm sure, to see that no matter what you say, sometimes it doesn't even matter. Like it's you can literally say anything, you can do it, and it's just like there's going to be some sort of experience that this person has that is, I don't want to say necessary, but like it's just how it plays out. And so that's been the case with even uh, protocols like using methadone for their recovery and stuff. There are some people that it becomes very clear because they're using illicit fentanyl that that's probably a better option than a partial agonist like Suboxone,
Yeah.
and still it doesn't play out in a way that is favorable for whatever reason. And it's like I think we can acknowledge that there are people who things don't work for. I
Yeah.
just, again, when I go into that, I go into the one thing that is presented as the answer that tends to not work for the majority. So, and this brings me to this, and I'm like totally derailing it right now, bro. But I want to know your take on this really quick. So,
Yeah.
do you think that people are constitutionally incapable, and do you think that if 12 step doesn't work for someone, that it's because they weren't honest? And I know I already know, like, I have an idea where you're going to go with this, and that's why I'm asking you. But what do you think when I say that? And I'm not trying to take over as like
Not taking
steering
over.
it or hosting
This is
it, but I
actually
just
this
want to.
is the longest that this podcast has ever gone, and I like the question. I think this would actually be good down the line to have another podcast
Yeah,
again
let's do that.
where we don't where we I mean we've heard your story and we were on that for a long time, but this is good stuff right here. Let me tell you something. Do I think that people are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves? This is a great saying, at least as far as what he tries to profess, right?
Yeah,
Written a certain way. I know that when they talk about there are those with mental, what is it? Grave emotional and mental disorders. They're
disorders.
basically
Yeah,
talking about people with mental health, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, I have a friend named Bubu Garcia. He lives in Arizona, and he um, was raised in AA, like I was raised in AA. He was raised by the Johnny Harrises, which are more over there in Bellflower Big Book Group, and then I was, raised by people in AA that were more lenient and loose, like they weren't
Yeah,
dogmatic at all.
yeah, I feel you.
So he's been traumatized by AA in a sense because he's a deep soul that definitely he didn't even know how to read. He learned how to read in the big book through his sponsor. So and
Oh, damn.
now he's a writer, and we talked about that he hates that line in Alcoholics Anonymous. He hates that. He thinks it's putting people down. It's making them feel small or even look small or just
Yeah,
portrays them as like total fucking losers. And I think humans are humans. I think we don't have to be addicts or alcoholics or labeled as those types of things for us to be dishonest. Like I could tell my girlfriend if she's like, "Where are you?" I could say, "Well, I'm on the 405," but I'd be lying because I haven't even left wherever I'm at right now, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
can be constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself in that very moment. I also feel this is for my own sake, like I think that that whole term of I think he buys his own lies. I think he believes his own lies. I think she believes her own lies. I don't really necessarily think that's true anymore. I used to. I used to say that shit. I used to think
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I think that when a person's being dishonest, I think deep within their own core, they know they're telling a lie.
Yeah,
They know they're
dude.
telling a lie. Like,
Yeah,
you know why? Because they will cover up and continue to lie over a lie over a lie,
yeah,
right? And sometimes little white lies turn into a person just being a big fat liar. Whatever, to each their own.
dude.
Now, let me also say this. I believe that as I hear in a lot of your stuff, AA is outdated. Did you know that there's another version of the? Finally, they've decided within general service and things like that to come out with a big book that's written in everyday language.
Yeah,
It is at a fifth grade level as opposed to the old English fucking folklorian like Shakespearean style of writing. Uh,
yeah,
I believe that that could be more helpful and might save more people that actually will have the 12-step process. Do we have rigid AA members right now that say, I'm not about to fucking take my sponsee through that. This has already worked just fine for all these years. Yeah, we got those guys. Do we have a lot of ego that's wrapped up in the dogmatic style of preaching AA? Were they even called sponsors back then? Was that even a requirement, or was it more of a spiritual advisory type of movement? And then on top of that, there's something that was on the tip of my mind that I really wanted to say, and now I fucking forgot it. And I usually don't forget shit. I
Dude, I
I believe that personally, like I like the NA workbook. I like the steps, the way that they simplified it. The only reason the NA even came out was because they were judged by people in AA for talking about drugs so much. I also I believe that uh my friend Boo Boo, who always makes these pictures of like of Bill Wilson, and it says something along the lines of, I can't, I'm paraphrasing, but uh, we're not supposed to be dogmatic in AA because that keeps us frozen in a certain type of mindset. And that was never the ideas of the founders. Like they actually wanted, we only know a little is what they even said, right? So truth be told, they don't know all that much. And what was crazy is that Bill Wilson wrote the big book with 3 years of sobriety. So for him to even define, I know I just remembered what I wanted to talk to you about. For him to
yeah,
even define alcoholism the way that he pronounced it, or even tried to like define it based off of Dr. Silkworth and certain ideologies, um, we're in a different era now. We're in a
yeah,
different age. Boo Boo
yeah,
often tells me that even the doctor's opinion is outdated. If they're going to put out another edition of the Big Book, why don't we get a doctor like what's his name? God, I love him too so much. He talks about trauma a lot. I'm sure you know who he is,
Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate. So
Yeah.
he
Oh,
actually,
he's fire.
Guru has a podcast, and he had his son on there, and he thinks that Gabor Mate should have some input if they're going to put out another big book. Let's not call it a disease. Let's not call it alcoholism isn't really a disease. And so he gets pretty deep into that. I think you and Boo would have some great conversations just on your own time. You think a lot alike. Like Boo Boo will still go to AA meetings and sometimes be asked to speak. But when we identify, both he and I, like
Yeah.
being an alcoholic when I was drinking is being an active alcoholic. Being an addict when I'm actively using drugs, I'm addicted to drugs. But if I'm not doing it anymore, then am I that? Am I labeling myself? So sometimes when I identify in an AA meeting, I'll say, my name is Pej. I'm a grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a member
Yeah.
of this organization, but I'm not an active alcoholic to call myself an alcoholic today. So, it can go pretty deep. Sometimes I do say Pej alcoholic when I'm in a meeting. It just comes out of
Yeah.
my mouth. It's just
Yeah.
been something that I've been programmed to say for all these years. But I'm not, I'll go to a closed meeting of AA and nobody wants you to talk about drugs or make sure you identify as an alcoholic, or we'll shut you down or we'll kick you out and all that. I don't like it. I don't like that
Yeah.
type of AA. So I'm very comfortable in my AA world, but I also do like to think outside the box. And I love going to Agape. I love other forms of learning how people can be better without just subscribing to one organization.
Yeah, dude, no, you brought up a lot of really important things, and it makes me think about like what I was just thinking about this today, in that even again, like referencing like chapter 5 when it's talking about, the unfortunates, it's like, we're looking at something that you have to reference when this was written, and the fact that when there was no options and then now there is one, that you're going to see a higher efficacy for something when,
Right.
again, if you imagine that there's nothing and then all of a sudden there's this. And so what I kind of push back against is this concept that now in this day and age, if it doesn't work for someone, it means that they are incapable, they weren't honest. And it's just like, bro, it's that to me is like goes against the spirit of like accountability and
Right.
acknowledging that some things are just not effective. You know what I'm saying? And
I always tried not to read too far into it because I thought maybe perhaps they're talking about the people that keep relapsing or keep on going back to using or drinking or
yeah,
whatever. Maybe they're just not. at a point where they want to be, at one with themselves and be like, this has been a problem. Like I keep fucking banging my head against the wall. That's kind of how I interpreted that.
Yeah, I think.
But when Boo Boo went a little bit deeper on it, I thought, yeah, maybe it does sound like they're kind of putting down a person and saying like we just don't accept them because they're not honest with themselves.
Yeah, my perception definitely is more in the realm of like a way of kind of pushing aside accountability with when it comes to efficacy, because that's the thing that I've faced a lot with when I'm talking about other people, or I see people sharing their experiences, that it's always like you didn't try. And then the irony is that I get that, and it's like, bruh, I again, I was like the poster boy. So it's like,
Yeah, no,
and dude,
been
I
there. And I
totally,
asked you that at the beginning. I said, have you been in AA
yeah,
to really like know what you're talking? I watched one of your other videos recently too, where you said something along the lines of people that when you label AA, that it's the fellowship that you're actually talking about, as opposed. Personally, I don't think I hear a lot of people that say I stopped going to AA because, right? And well, what because of what? Because my sponsor aired out my dirty laundry. Because those people in that one meeting, they talk to me a certain way, so I don't even like AA, and I just think, well, that then go to a different meeting. Like, I
yeah,
mean,
that, I mean, dude, that's the thing. And I know, dude, we've ran this long, and I enjoy talking to you. I do have to hop on another thing, and I
no,
apologize for
we'll schedule
totally
another one for a future.
derailing and going into another direction. But so there's discrepancies when it comes to
Yeah.
individual groups and fellowship and personality and all that. I tend to go more of like, I'm going into the big book and I'm looking at the literature, or I'm looking at, the steps, and seeing how those things can be, again, either misappropriated or, utilized in a way that I view as less problematic.
Uh-huh.
And then still trying to critique that and go, okay, well, even if this is implemented by the most ethical, great person, where are some areas that there's lack of oversight, whether it be based on the sponsor's personal awareness or these other things? And it's not that I think, that I'm some ultimate authority on this. It's
Yeah.
that I come from an informed perspective
You know what you're talking
as
about.
someone who understands 12 steps. So it made me feel like this is like a soul lesson for me, bro. Like it was a soul lesson. And then it became a part of my purpose in life, was to go, how can I use my experience as someone who's accepted and who found success in that to advocate for the people who were not accepted and did not find success in that?
So then
And so,
let's take it right into what you do right now, since we are out
all
of
right,
time.
all right,
What you do right now is alternative recovery.
yeah.
And
So
would it be more for the people that want an alternative to 12 steps?
yeah, so I'll keep it real quick. Basically, alternative recovery, again, its inception was during quarantine on Clubhouse. I started it with the idea that we do not identify as addicts or alcoholics. That was the main thing. It was like we just come in, we say hello, how's it going, and we don't say anything around identifying, qualifying. It was
Okay.
just hello. Then it grew into a space for people who had feel like they were harmed by 12 step and needed to be able to talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, not as the main topic of discussion or anything, but a space to where people can say, hey, this is how I feel and this has been my experience. But it has evolved into a space for people who use psychedelics, for people who are taking medications for recovery, people who are actively using. That's the main thing, is I like to hear from people who are actively using. I
Yeah.
want them to
Like a
talk.
safe space. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear from people. That's where I get the most value from. Is I want to hear from people who use drugs, who may or may not have a substance use disorder. I want to hear from people who have alcohol use disorder, may or may not, and I want them to talk. And I want to
How can they
gain
find you?
insight. It's you have to hit me up because we keep it private. We don't want to put it out there. You can email me, McCauley at sextonspace.com. You can also go to my website and that's sextonspace.com. I do consulting. I don't promote that. We also have an alternative workbook that serves as an alternative to the steps. That's also part of it as well, but we really probably only have maybe 2 or 3 members that even do that. The majority just use it as a space to talk, but it's on Zoom every single Wednesday. And yeah, we have very clear rules and kind of boundaries about, again, like we don't do the kind of qualifying statements and things of that nature, and then just other stuff like that. But yeah, it's out of I personally do not need a meeting ever. So I do it as just to offer an option to people. And it was something that I was hesitant to do just because of finding a lot of peace in the ability to be in the moment without any sort of requirement for community engagement. You know what I mean? And
That's
and dude, we went into so many things, and I'd be more than happy to do it again because
yeah,
I'd
we
love
can
to
talk about some things in the
expand
future.
on.
Definitely. I'll be hitting you up again.
Oh yeah,
It's fun. This was good. It
dude.
went well.
Oh yeah. Thanks for
All right.
having me,
Well,
bro.
this was another episode of PEJ'S Recovery Corner. If you see us on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share with others. And you and I will come up with a topic for as far as what we will label this as. And go do your thing today. Thank you for coming on and being so open and just talking about everything. It was wonderful to finally talk with you.
Thanks for having me, bro.
All right. Have a good day. Thank you.